maybe as we get
Hello.
started, um, Professor Drummond, do you want to just give us a little bit of history about where you went to school and kind of what made your decisions on getting into the healthcare law space for your career?
Yeah, it was I was bound and committed my entire life to go into, not at all. I went to University of Dallas for undergrad. I was a political philosophy major, so it's sort of like if you want to know the benefits of a monarchy, I'm really good at keying you in on that. But the philosopher king we're all into. But so and then I went to University of Texas Law School. And I knew you can basically divide the legal world in sort of an easy, my students hear me talk about dividing the law into halves, like, private law, public law, state law, federal law, stuff like that. There's a lot of these divisions, but the practice of law you can kind of divide into litigators or trial lawyers and people who do either transactional or regulatory work. One of my partners says there are stand-up lawyers and sit-down lawyers, and the stand-up lawyers are trial lawyers who stand up and make arguments, and the sit-down lawyers sit at desks and look at documents all day. And so I knew I wanted to be a sit-down lawyer, because I knew I wanted to do deals. And I happened to get recruited out of law school to a law firm that was a healthcare specialty firm. Now, within that firm, I was not considered a healthcare lawyer. I was considered a transactional lawyer or a corporate lawyer. But in any other law firm, I would have been considered a healthcare lawyer. And so that's how I ended up here. I didn't care that it was healthcare. And it was in the 80s, the oil industry was doing terribly. And I was in Texas. And so it's like I wanted to be in an industry that wasn't the oil industry. And it just happened to work out that way. So I didn't aim for it at all. Once I started doing it, it became really fascinating just how regulated the industry is. It's a huge industry in terms of the dollar amount of money that passes through. The portion of the economy that healthcare takes up is huge. The government is the single largest payer for it, and it involves health and safety. It involves people's actual life and health. And so for those are three different reasons why you'll see a lot of regulation or a lot of law on something. Is if it's a big industry, if the government's paying for it, and if it involves people's actual, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And so it's a super regulated area. And so there's a whole lot of stuff that's in health law. As my students who just took the midterm all know now, it is really a lot. But so I just happened to luck into it. I mean, I'm happy that I'm here, and I think it's a fascinating business to be in. And I have a daughter who's an occupational therapist. I have a sister-in-law who's a physician. I've got other people in the healthcare field in my family, but I didn't really start off looking to do that. It just I kind of ended up there. And so there wasn't any intentionality to it. And all I've ever done really is practice at law firms. I've never practiced actually with a client or in a client. That being said, all of my clients are in healthcare. And so I see a lot of the people who I deal with on the client side who are, most of them are lawyers, but a lot of them aren't. And so they come into contact with the law in different ways. And so I think that's sort of those types of people who are connected to the law in a healthcare space, like compliance officers, or really kind of anybody who's making business decisions where you've got different providers involved. Those are areas where it becomes really important that you know the law, understand the law, and those are areas where you can have a career without having to actually go to law school. And so I think that's probably, now that I've blabbed on for way too long.
No, that's actually perfect because those are the questions that we get is, okay, I maybe don't want to invest the time and headaches maybe to go to law school, but they want to be in this space of policy, regulation, compliance, or something like that. So I think this is going to be really helpful. And we do have a few, honestly, since my time with the program, probably 4 or 5 students who've gotten this business degree and then went on to healthcare law or to law school to become a healthcare lawyer. So I think that there's a little something for everyone. This is really good. Thank you. So Professor Tesmer, a little bit about your
Hey,
education and history would be great.
Well, I'd like to first confess that I'm just not the best driver in the world. So I apologize for the couple minutes getting transitioned there. I swear I gave myself an extra 15 and it just didn't work out.
Safety
Uh,
first. That's
I've
all.
always been a bad driver, and I just warn everyone when you see me coming, just move. I try, but it's low skill set. So that does not have anything to do with practicing or what you asked me. I, like Jeff, did this sort of by accident, but I've gone a different route. I did not take monarchy classes in school. I got a finance degree at Texas Christian University over in Fort Worth. I was raised here, so I'm from here. The farthest I've ever gotten from home is when I went to UT Law. Great law school, right, Jeff? Right? Yeah, great law school. Affordable law school for what you get too. Really great instruction and heady stuff for a bargain price if you're from Texas. So it's very good. After I did that, I went into private practice in a law firm in Fort Worth, and that I had clerked for. And they didn't really do much healthcare law. They had one guy who had some clients who, when you're the baby lawyer and you're not in a huge firm, they make you do everything. So you like get to run around and do what extra work there is. And I got to work with him a little bit. He had a doctor's group. So we worked a lot with the doctor's side, not so much the hospitals or any of the other folks, but we did have a huge insurance company practice. And they had a lot of mergers and acquisitions they were doing. Like Jeff, I did like to go to court. I liked it very much, but it wouldn't fit with my family plans. I wanted to have kids. And, when you're a litigator, you sleep in the office. So that wasn't cool. So I was like, no, I really like the business side, but the business side was a little boring to me until I found healthcare. The transactional law it's fine, but healthcare is really, really complicated. And so when I found that with him, I got more and more interested in it, and actually got my first job doing full-time healthcare law work, working for a district attorney. So I never thought I'd work for a district attorney because I always thought of them as criminal lawyers. And in Tarrant County, they actually have the civil section of the district attorney's office. It's kind of a rare setup. And that civil section not only did their regular county work, but they represented the public hospital in Fort Worth, which is John Peter Smith or JPS and all their clinics and their residents. So they had doctors and they had the facilities. They also had at the time, they had a home health agency and their own Medicaid insurance plans. There's a lot to do. But while I was working for them, representing all the hospital district and stuff, compliance became a thing where they hire compliance officers into the organization really to do monitoring and auditing of regulatory compliance with all the rules and laws that Jeff was mentioning, that there's just so many, from the payment system to the delivery model and operational systems, so many rules. So they were building internal compliance departments, and JPS hired me to be an executive, the chief compliance officer for their system, the first one. So I had to create that program. I want to point out to Jeff, because he'll throw up when he hears this a little bit. I was 28 when that happened. So I'd been out of law school 4 years, which seems like forever to you guys maybe on the call. But I bit off a little bit more than I could chew in a very public environment. So I was constantly running with my hair on fire. It's the only time in my life I've had to take anti-anxiety medication. I started having anxiety attacks for a couple months. I just calmed down just enough to handle it. But it really was a rough entry into the deep end of the pool. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I enjoy working very much. And so it was really interesting. And over 10 years there, I got to do not only that, but moved on to doing a lot of operational stuff for the system. Most of it was building businesses, starting a new hospital, starting new clinics, things like that, which did require a lot of regulatory background, but you had to know a lot of operational and financial things too. So my finance background helped. I got an MBA while I was there from UT Dallas. Yay. And it really, I enjoyed being an executive in a big system that way. But then I got offered a job to go and actually be the president of an education and research foundation that worked with all of the health systems in North Texas. That was at the Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council. And that promised to be a little less hair raising than the public hospital experience. I thought maybe there wouldn't be so many emergencies, and I was right. That was great. And certainly no lawsuits, really great. But there was a lot of program building across these competitors, frankly. And so the job became, it was very good to know healthcare law and regulation, but there were people who worked for me that would give me that official advice. My job was to manage a business that was a big nonprofit and to bring in grant dollars and work with federal agencies and state agencies on community-wide funding projects. They were very diverse. Some of them were just to do kind of community health things that we would do together. Some of them were to implement electronic health records in thousands of doctors' offices. We got huge federal grant funding for that during the day. So it was really fun. I learned a lot more about health information technology there. We had a huge data asset that we had to work with and all these grants in tech. And that was something I did not get much of in my previous work. Sometime in there, I started teaching a little bit for Britt. I can't remember which year now, but I've had a great time doing that part-time. But I did switch to the job I'm in now, which is running, it's a very much more policy-focused organization. It is a combination of business leaders in Dallas and all the CEOs of all the health systems in North Texas. And they focus on large policy matters, mostly at the state level. So this last legislative session, while everything was crazy, we again unsuccessfully advocated for Medicaid expansion. It might surprise you to hear that a lot of business leaders in a conservative state like ours want Medicaid expansion, but they know math and they know the math. So they want it because there's such excellent financial implications to having that kind of money flow in. The other thing that we worked on was getting all the funding at the state level for a new state mental health hospital in Dallas, and we were successful in that. So we're going to have one of those. They're planning it now, and we'll be going into construction as soon as the planning's done, and the funds look like, I think the last vote is maybe this week, but everyone's agreed on it, so I think it's going through.
Where's it going to be, Kristen?
It'll be in the medical district. They're going to, UT Southwestern has to, you have to have a university practice to staff and operate those. So it'll be near where UT Southwestern is. There's a chance that there will be a very nice gift given to the school of a bunch of land there to put it on, which I can't announce directly yet, but in any case, it will be there.
Yes, okay.
It'll be down there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Somewhere it needs to be.
Yes, that's a good place for it.
Yeah. So that was random. The whole thing was random. The whole career's been random. Just taking opportunities as they came up. But I have to tell you that it's really fun work. And one of the things I encourage you to do as you look into this, I mean, you're asking how this happens, and it doesn't help you to hear, oh, it's random. Good luck. The most important thing, I think, in all that, every time I'd work, and I think Jeff does this a lot. Jeff and I have worked together. I mean, outside of UT Dallas. He's an excellent lawyer. He represents his clients vigorously. And that's why you notice Jeff, is he is a vigorous advocate and counselor. He's not the quiet one in the room. He asks the questions. He makes the suggestions. He goes out there on a limb. He fixes it I mean, that is important. If you bring energy and interest to your job, those random things, those opportunities will come to you because people are looking for you if you're that kind of person. And frankly, if you're not that excited about your field, you may want to look at another field. Life is short. You want to work in something that jazzes you.
Mm-hmm. And I think in healthcare, in the healthcare space, I think that because there are so many different ways to look at things, there's so many different approaches that you can take to something, and it's 3D chess. I mean, it's sort of interwoven with things, and when you start moving one piece, other things move around. You have to kind of figure out what all is going to happen. There's really not certainly across on the legal side, but really kind of across the industry, people are open to new ideas and new ways of doing things. And so
Jeff, by the way, is the Sheldon of 3D chess. I'm only the Leonard. So
it's primarily I'm just making moves and hoping something works out. But yeah, it's but that's you can't, if you're the person who's coming up with ideas, and you're the person who's willing to sort of explore new ways of doing things without getting, and now you're going to make some mistakes, you got to be prepared for that, but and you don't want to overcommit to something, but I think it's that also is people who come up with new ideas and new ways to do things, or at least willing to talk about them and try and figure those out. I think that's really useful within the healthcare space as well.
Very true. It's very hard to make changes in healthcare because it's like, turning the Titanic sometimes, but people are very interested. They realize it's not ideal the way a lot of things are or are done, and they want to work on making that turn. So I agree. You got to have a curiosity of mind and a hardiness of spirit to work in the field.
Well, and a theme that's come up kind of all week so far, and we've had very different types of areas of focus in healthcare. And some of that came up in, I think it was a revenue cycle session this morning. One of our guest speakers, she had started as a billing rep, kind of entry level, and now she's the director of business intelligence for Conifer Health Systems, so in revenue cycle. But she said something pretty smart, which was, you can't just think it's not my job, I'm not going to learn about it, because healthcare is so interwoven that you still have to know a little something about everything. Maybe not drawing blood, from a clinical side, but kind of everything else, you need to know a little bit about it, because it isn't just siloed. It all kind of works together.
I think that's a brilliant comment, Quincy. And I'll say this, Jeff and I'm going to bet Jeff is like me. We don't know how to draw blood, but we know a lot of rules about how you're supposed to do it. So, I mean,
yes.
It's like, and who can do it and how that works. So you're right. You start with something.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lifelong learning environment. So if you get into the field, hey, you know what? One of the great things is, though, everyone wants to teach you in the field. I have never, well, not everyone wants to learn everything. Like sometimes I've been in meetings with a bunch of physicians and they really don't want to understand the balance sheet. They just don't care. But, they love it when you'll listen for hours about neurosurgery, even if you don't understand all the words, and actually you get a lot out of it. So I think it's a place where most people want to learn as much as they can, as well as practice what they're learning.
Well, so that's kind of leads into a great little segue to, as I mentioned, we have varying degrees of, I guess, maybe knowledge or work experience on this call. Some are just kind of trying to figure things out, maybe freshman, sophomore, know they want to get into healthcare, just don't know quite what yet. But then we have a question that was posed in the chat, so maybe we can kind of look at a compare and contrast.
I see Brian.
He says, yes, yeah. So he's working as a legal assistant at a law firm, studying business analytics. But what are the different kinds of positions available to people who are familiar with the legal industry and healthcare? So I would just pose kind of a two-part question. What are positions who aren't familiar? And maybe if you could touch on, what you know about kind of some maybe entry-level positions, and then those who are familiar with kind of the legal side, what's the career path maybe for those who know something about it?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, but I think that almost, because probably, I mean, there's a legal component to almost everything that happens in healthcare. So I mean, it's sort of, you can't be involved in healthcare almost in any aspect without having at least a little bit of understanding. And so I think that there's really is some legal familiarity. You have to have some legal familiarity. I think the areas where you see it like really has a real big impact is obviously things like compliance, which is specifically geared towards primarily legal compliance, but other things as well. But it's really compliance, being a compliance officer working in the compliance field. That's really one where you see a whole lot of you need a really good understanding of what the healthcare laws and regulations are. Coding, billing and coding, anything on the finance side that's specific to the interchange between the provider and the payers. So billing and coding, I think, is an area where there's a whole lot of potential issues that you really need to understand the regulations, less the law, more the regulations, more sort of the fine-tuning bits of it, like the provider manuals and all of those other things, the various manuals that are part of the whole Medicare, Medicaid payment system. So those types of areas, I think you'll see a whole lot of it, a whole lot of sort of connection or interaction in the healthcare on the legal side. Other areas where you have a little bit less would be things like, but it still has legal components, are finance, not from the billing side, but just general finance, because you have to know what kind of transactions you can do with the other providers, so that, and what kinds of transactions you can't do because you have Stark or anti-kickback, other implications. And so you have to avoid going far down a road that you find out at the end when the lawyers finally come in and help structure the deal that, like, well, you can't do this at all. And so you need it a little bit, a bit of it kind of everywhere. Operational and finance, less so. Compliance and billing, coding, things like that, more so. So I think that's kind of where I'd see it.
So I see you, Brian, with you are a legal assistant and you're studying business analytics. So I'm going to guess that your brain and your functions are extremely organized. You clearly can work with people who are lawyers who act like they can be organized, but you somehow lasso them in and get them better off. Thank you. And if you are studying business analytics, that means that your analytical skills are heightened. And so I would, if I were hiring to your skill set, I'd be looking to put you maybe in the IT division for doing some analytics database work for me, and maybe on some projects actually where there would be some unique ideas coming out. IT does a lot of projects for some of the operational areas. And one of the great things, if you're an IT person and you're super organized and you know about analytics and managing data sets, you can help those people while learning all about the content of what they do. It's a great way to learn through a system. So I'd give you that. And the other thing I'd say is you might be interested in somewhere in the risk division. You know, risk management works with quality improvement and some other areas that are high-end business analytics, and they're always looking for people that have some legal background so they understand the context of some of the risks they're evaluating. People without that background, you know, they sometimes can get lost in the numbers and not understand the implications of it across a business entity for liability concerns or whatever. So I'd say those would be two hot areas for you specifically. I might look for those, something in the business analytics sides, project driven, on IT or risk management and the quality or performance improvement divisions.
Super smart. Thank you. So here's another question. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm just looking. Wow. Yeah. Are you a bioethicist, Dariush? No? Yes, maybe?
No, I'm not, but my brother's a professor, a bioethics professor at Loyola.
Oh, wonderful.
I get some of that from him, sort of the interest and sort of what the issues are. He runs the online master's program over there at Loyola in bioethics.
Wow. Look, first off, wow. But I have a cousin. I can't believe I'm telling a cousin story. She's from Dallas here. She went to Hcca, and she went and got a bioethics degree out of Tennessee and then went to law school at UT. And you know what she does now? She does mergers and acquisitions. She ran away. So I laugh when I see that about it. There are a lot of rules for bioethicists, obviously, especially with large academic medical centers that do a lot of research and clinical trials and things like that. I would say, people who study bioethics are not legal experts. But they often work with legal experts on those kind of high-end, meaty, heady issues. I always struggle. I was on an ethics committee when I worked at JPS as in my role for the company. And even before then, I gave advice to the ethics committee when I worked as their lawyer, their counsel. That's an emotionally challenging role, as well as one that requires a lot of study. And of course, philosophy is huge in it, and I imagine Jeff is more educated in that than I am with his background.
Well, yeah, but the problem is whenever you're talking about ethics and the law, those are two things that generally don't go together. Yeah, so
they're supposed to.
I know, but really, so I think and I think it is interesting, but it comes into a big play. Really, two areas where bioethics really comes into play in the business of healthcare, and one is research. So Kristen said, being on a institutional review board or something like that, which you'll tend to see at large hospital systems and especially academic medical centers. And then, but also you'll see it at almost any facility of any size will have an ethics committee, because you have to have one when you have end of life issues come up. And so those types of things, that's where that work comes into play. In terms of
always player, lawyer, doctor, and bioethicist. Yeah.
Front office stuff, you'll see it less. And on the legal side, we try to let ethics get in the way of what we do. I'm joking.
We have our own ethics, right?
That's right.
Quincy, is this something that that UTD is looking at, that business school is looking at, or program? Or?
I have not heard a word about it. So we don't always hear about, if they're kind of looking at expanding programs or that kind of thing, but it is not something that I have heard of, no.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Okay, here's another question.
Oh my, you guys are an eclectic group here. Industrial engineering and management. Oh, please fix the supply chain for us. Could you just, can we just hire you right now and just, oh my God. How can you introduce yourself to the industry? Go to the purchasing division and say, I will help you fix it. And just start there. I mean, you would not believe the tragedy that we're working in. If you think you're worried about getting Christmas toys, oh my God. Wait. Okay, Jeff, go ahead. I'm waxing.
No, I think that so you're currently in the healthcare industry, or I'm trying to figure out from Amani here
she's getting her MS. Yeah.
My camera is not working, so my apologies for that. So currently, actually, I'm an industrial engineer. I have PhD in industrial engineering, and recently decided to pursue healthcare management and leadership at UTD, just because I'm interested in this industry, and I've been trying to introduce my set skills, and I also have background in management. I currently work with the city of Dallas, overseeing strategy planning and performance improvement team that includes different divisions like in safety, environmental, data analytics. But my issue is having recruiters and employers getting their attention and look at the set skills of industrial engineering, because usually they require some experience in healthcare. So that's why I'm like, okay, if you guys need that experience, I'm gonna pursue this master's program. So that's why I'm asking this question. What is the best area and what is the best way to attract employers?
Just first, to look at and utilize you. Get people like you. We need a whole lot more of in this industry. And thank you for being interested enough to pursue this and not be completely put off by our ignorance of the usefulness of industrial engineering and engineers. I'm going to just say that off. I think we could. I have a PhD engineering father, and my life is so structured and organized by default from being raised, and we could use that discipline, that structure, that type of thinking in our industry. It is lacking. It's lacking in all our training, and you're right. That most people you talk to are not even going to understand what you'd be capable of with that background that's in our field. You could start outside hospitals. What do you think, Jeff? Maybe something that's in the medical device and manufacturing, or what do you think?
That's exactly what I was thinking, is drugs and devices. I mean, that's really sort of where you see more engineering in the healthcare arena. You see more of it there, that's what I would look at. And there's a lot of overlap with regard to what's basically people who are inventing processes, like physicians. There are a lot of physicians, particularly surgeons, and people who are in the operating room regularly, who are involved in drug and device, or involved in device invention and manufacturing and design. And so I think that's where the drug and device industry, I think, is where I would go, because they'll appreciate the engineering background as much as somebody just general engineering, but that gets you into the healthcare space.
Hey, and if she went to law school, she could become a rich patent lawyer too. So
exactly.
Think about it, man. Just a little more school.
Be like your cousin, not actually doing the.
I don't know how my husband would feel about that.
Husbands are often intimidated by lawyer wives, so be careful.
He has his PhD also in engineering, so we speak the same language, and he's supporting what I'm doing. But if I tell him another couple of years of education, I think he will.
He's
I'm not
looking at his checkbook going, "That's money out, honey."
right.
Okay.
Appreciate the input. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Well, so kind of on a related note, are there any like professional organizations or, groups outside of UTD that you all would suggest students get involved with if they want to learn more, or just maybe network with folks who are kind of in this regulatory policy space in healthcare?
Yeah, the first one that obviously comes to mind is the Healthcare Compliance Association, Hcca, which is really a very good, and it's a huge organization in terms of the number of people who participate in it. And it's connected to the SCCE, which is a Society for Corporate Compliance and Ethics. And so they're kind of connected to each other, but it's specific to healthcare. And they do conferences, have a big annual conference. It's like 2 or 3 days. And then they do a bunch of conferences like throughout the country. And normally there's one in Dallas. And some of them, the regional ones normally have general or sort of general applicability. Some of them will be more specified. So I think that's a great place to look. And I think they may even have like a student division or something like that.
They do. They have it's a national student division that you can join. And I was around when they started Hcca. I'm starting to feel really old, Jeff. I got to tell you guys, nationally and regionally, they were some of the best networking that I did when I started into that field. It was great. And they'll give, if you stay involved in it, they really offer up a lot of opportunities to share your experience and teach for them as well. So it's a good group. What about Hfma? What do you think about the Healthcare Finance Management Association? They seem like they might be a good.
Oh, they're great. I get to speak for them occasionally. One of my partners in Houston is very well connected with them, and that's also a very good organization. More connected to the finance side than sort of the sort of either purely legal or purely operational stuff. But yeah, that's another good one, and they may also have a student organization. One that I deal with a lot because of the Hfma work that I do, and I always tell my class, I always give my class a Kristen story about when you left the conference. When we were at the conference in DC, the Hfma conference in DC, and you left to go to Austin to talk the legislature out of replicating Hfma in the state of Texas. Which I love to
testify. That was exciting.
Yeah, it was like the best thing to ever happen out of that whole thing was that you got them to back off what they were going to do.
Well, they were being silly, so it wasn't really that hard. I mean, they just needed to know they were being silly. I don't think they were fully aware of what was going on.
I think it's hard to tell them that they're being silly sometimes.
I didn't say it that way, but it was obvious at the end. So,
So because of the Hfma stuff that I do, the IAPP, which is International Association of Privacy Professionals, for healthcare privacy is a big part of healthcare, obviously, and so that's one thing to it's always going to be there, and it's always not necessarily specifically HIPAA, but it sort of expands beyond that. And one of the things I found out from participating in that organization is the need for talent in that organization, the need for talent of people who do privacy is huge, and organizations can't get people who can do it. And so privacy and data security, if you're techie at all and can do data security, you can code, you can do data security. I mean, there's those jobs are just out there,
They're just laying there waiting for you if you can do it. And really the Hfma is similar in that, if you want to get up sometimes starting in that finance division or like Jeff is saying in that IT division, that's a really good place to then jump up into more management focused things, because you've got a skill set that you get there that lets you see large parts of the kind of across the organization a little more than people who go into one operational area. They might learn how to run the lab really well, but that doesn't mean they understand other parts of the organization and the connections. And if you want to move up into management echelons, you need to understand how things work or don't work together. So because that becomes your new skill set after you do some of these other things. What about just ACHE, just so you meet executives and people who are around? they have a student division. I know they're not as specialized. They're really teaching you management skills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We had a session with the ACHE executive director, and then Jay Alexander and Jared Shelton on Monday. So it's kind of like a, networking 101, how to utilize LinkedIn. So students on the call will have that available on our website probably in a week or so. So check that out too.
Those guys are great. If they've talked to you, then you know everything you need to know. Jeff and I can go. That's it. They're really awesome.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
All of them over there. John is so sweet, and then Jay is a go-getter. She's awesome, and Jared is doing a great job running a very quickly growing business and out in Collin County. So yeah, they're good folk.
Well, there's another question here, and I would say let's keep this into two parts because I think they're both needed to be answered by you all. But the first one would be related to home health agencies. So he says, I work in a home health care operations and function primarily as an auditor for a group of home health branches within my organization. Have you worked with or at any home health organizations?
I have, and we just sold several. We're primarily doing deals with companies that are buying and selling home health agencies, and I've done some work in the rehab space as well, which is sort of there's a close overlap. Home health, rehab, and hospice all have a lot of sort of overlap between them. One of the things, home health is a very interesting business because there are so many small operators, and it really kind of filled up with small operators. The industry kind of filled up with small operators, such so that Medicare basically put a cap on any new ones getting in. And so and because there are so many small, wherever you have a whole lot of small operators, you're going to have a whole lot of variability in particularly compliance, but really in all kinds of their activities. And so it kind of has a bad reputation because of the number of small providers as being a place where there's a lot of troubling activity, a lot of potential fraud, and it's also easy for fraud to get passed over. I think that there's a big need in the home health industry for more compliance activities, and so I think that's kind of my answer on that is that, and part of it also is that I only see companies because they have compliance issues. And so to some extent, it's always, people who are in trouble are the only ones who really kind of want to come to you. And so that's can sometimes, sort of skew my view of things. But I think that's sort of an interesting, sort of facet of the home health industry at this point.
It's been a long time since I worked with home health organizations, but I will tell you that my impression back then, I felt like one of the problems in home health at the time was that you had physicians who were willing to exaggerate their oversight of the activities in the home health agency. And I'm not accusing anyone in particular. I'm saying generally that was sort of how these things ran, that doctors would sometimes pick up relationships with these organizations so they could make extra money doing paperwork. And I'm not sure they were always compliant. The ones that I knew that were compliant, frankly, had a hard time financially existing. So I think that it's an industry, first off, I think it's an industry that has struggled a long time with fair compensation for what they're doing. I think they're undervalued. There's not a single old person in the United States who wants to be in a nursing home or somewhere like that. They want to be taken care of at their house. And so I think home health is excellent in that regard. And with people getting older, I think it should be a booming business. And it makes sense financially, to try to take care of people in their house. I do think we've had flurries of activity in that field trying to rectify abuse of the field, as well as try to rectify some of the compensation arrangements for parity and fairness with home health. I don't think it's solved. I think it's a strenuous place to be working. I mean, I'm just being really honest. So thank you for doing it. And if you're doing the auditing and stuff and doing that, I'm sure you're bound up in a lot of things that, sometimes you go, oh, that all worked out. That's great. And a lot of times you're probably in stuff that you're having to deal with. So, thank you for doing that as an internal part of the kind of compliance or review division. That's a good thing. Oh my God, she wants advice too. Okay. That's okay. No, he wants advice. Okay, so I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, if you could have one piece of advice, one piece. You have
Let's go
lawyers.
with three.
do
Let's go with
that on
three
it.
each. Can we do that?
Wear sunscreen. Wear sunscreen.
Okay.
Is that a piece of advice?
Jeff, you're such a fair gentleman. You know, I can see you telling him to wear sunscreen. That's funny. Early careerist, one thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say, and I sort of, this kind of goes back to what Kristen said earlier, is one of the things that I would say is and I put it a little different. I'd say yes. Be willing to do other things in your organization. If they need something to be done and you decide that you're going to do it, and you decide you're going to be the person to do it, A, you'll become the person who does things, and B, you'll have another tool. Whatever it is, I mean, try to, if you say yes, but then try not to screw it up. But I mean, really just say yes. And then if you go out and do something, A, you'll know something more. B, you'll become the person who they go to get other things done. And the more things that you can do, the more like invaluable you are, and the less likely that they'll want to you'll be the person who gets thrown off the lifeboat or voted off the island. Back during the Y2K scare, one of my friends that came up to me and said, look, if it all goes haywire, you're welcome in my bunker because I can make furniture and I can brew beer. And it was like, those are two things that I will need, at some point. And it's like, if you have those skills, you may not be able to do anything else, but you're worthwhile. Saying yes so that you can do other things, being willing to jump in and do other things gives you those extra skills. And then you become more knowledgeable. You may find something you really like to do too. You may find something you absolutely hate doing and now to avoid it. So that would be my one piece of advice is say yes. Take the job that they give you and do it.
So smart. Thank you.
I'm trying to think back to when I was really young, and definitely Jeff's advice is really good, but I'll try to build on it. It depends on what you want to do with your career, right? It's the it depends answer that all lawyers give you. If you want to have a solid career where you are engaged and you are surrounded by a bunch of people who are well educated and well intentioned, or almost all of them are, I think healthcare is a great field and you should totally do it. As an early careerist, I think you have to think about where you are and where you want to be. And when I say that, I mean, if you say yes to everything, or even most things, or the best opportunities that are laying in front of you, or ask for projects, all of which I did and frankly encourage, you will be working harder than you expect. It is difficult to explain to you how hard you will be working. Okay, so for people who hear about how hard doctors work, you will be working that hard. So I need you to understand that if you do that, that leaves less time to work out, to pursue other leisure interests, to spend time with your family. Don't think you can bargain it. Time is a solid thing. Okay. And so if you want to do that, I totally encourage you. It's very, very worthwhile. But you also can get sucked into an enormous amount of time, and it may be more than you want to do. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't go in the field. It just means that you probably are going to progress more slowly in your career. So as an early careerist, I would think about that while you're saying yes and no to things. Either answer is fine for you. But if you're not thinking about that, you could end up in a place that isn't what you wanted or expected. And so please, you're not going to make the right decision every time. Don't get me, and don't beat yourself up about that. No one's perfect at this, or you wouldn't need school or practice or anything else. But think about it. And we were joking about our husbands earlier, that kind of thing. If you've got family on board, they need to be your partner in what you decide. It will make a difference. And like I drugged my children to the hospitals and they helped me make hospital corners before we opened the hospital. They were little kids, and I'm sure my lawyer would have freaked out if he'd have seen them in there, but we weren't doing anything. But they wanted to participate, and I wanted them involved because, I spent so much time, and they were curious and excited, and so it was fun. But if I hadn't had kids like that who were interested in that, who would go to the American Heart Association walk and the cancer walk and all the things I did every freaking weekend when we did all these things, I would have lost a lot. And a lot of people's families just aren't interested that way. And so, you know, think about those things. They're important. It's a team sport, I guess is what I'm saying. If there's a team, it's a team sport for sure. And just make sure that you're considering those things as you move through it.
Well, so kind of related to that, then, you know, as we had said, this is like these are working sessions. So you gave some advice. What would you give as a homework assignment for students on the call? Like one thing they should go home tonight, maybe this weekend, maybe later this month, to do to prepare themselves, or an action plan that they should make for themselves. What's one piece of advice you would give them for homework?
Go check out
tangible, like a tangible.
Go check out those organizations tonight we listed and choose the one that sounds most interesting to you and figure out how to join it.
Yeah, I think that's probably that's definitely the best advice is you know, go look those things up and follow things down rabbit holes, because I mean you start digging around on one of these websites and you get to, because Hcca, for example, has a zillion different like subcommittees. And so start looking at stuff like that, and you'll find stuff that you didn't even know happened, you didn't even know existed in healthcare. So that's one thing that I, as a, you know, sort of bit of homework. Secondly, if you don't already know like who your congressman is, who your you know state member and state rep are, find out who they are and go dig around on their websites to see if they have health policy people working for them. We talked a lot about compliance stuff, and we didn't really talk much about policy. That's one other area where, you know, sort of a lot of lawyers get involved in healthcare because on the policy side. Policy is really sort of forward looking. Compliance is really almost backwards looking, in that you're dealing with facts on the ground. Whereas for policy, you're dealing with facts in the future, to some extent. And there's a lot of there. Some of them are both, but it's kind of that way. And so that's one. If you're looking more on the policy side, that's a good place to look and try and figure out from who the politicians are, the ones who are making most of the policy decisions, or making the most policy, you know, have the most policy impact. So that's a place to look. And then once you find like who they're if they have some healthcare compliance people, and certainly you go with the two state senators as well, U.S. senators from Texas as well. Look at their staff and see if they can find who does their policy stuff. Google those people then and see what they're doing in which organizations they're in. And that will also help you start thinking about, these are other organizations to look at. Dig into all of that stuff. Don't be afraid to click through and find stuff. And I'd say that don't click like stupidly. You know, I don't want to get you a computer virus or something. I do tech security stuff too. But
two things, y'all. Yeah, don't send them a personal email of it. But actually, maybe you should and say, hey, what are you guys doing about policy? There are, on those sites for the professional organizations, there's also a whole bunch of free newsletters they'll send out. All you got to do is subscribe to their lists. Be sure you do that, because you are going to be constantly reading and learning if you're interested in this field. And they will give you the most current, what's happening now kind of things in these areas. And they're short, usually. They're sending you out little short blurbs, so it's good. The other thing is, and Jeff, I can't believe I didn't think of this. Thank you for mentioning policy like this. If you guys really are interested in how that's done, and I mean intellectually, like academically interested in how it's done, you may want to check into a Master's of Public Administration. So there is a master's degree you can get that's in public administration, and that doesn't prepare you for healthcare policy. It prepares you for all policy, like how government works in the policy setting arena. That you could end up working for a city or a county or a public hospital, or for private organizations that, like in the healthcare industry, are highly engaged in policy work. That is the preferred degree of people who do government relations and stuff like that in many fields. So if you have that interest, and you are looking for what are the next steps in my education to get into that kind of area, you might want to check out MPAs. They have them in many schools across the country, but certainly many here in Texas too. Austin's got the LBJ school. That's a great school. Texas Tech has a school. I'm not sure about all the others, but
I think well, there's a program here at UTD also. So
Is
I'm not sure how. Yeah, and it's in the EP school across the way, but.
cool. Okay. I mean, checking out your home one is always the first stop. First off, they usually love to spend time with you. I mean, they would want to recruit you into a master's program if they can. But they also, I mean, they're there. You can grab them, talk to them.
And I just put in the chat too, we're having you guys can Google this and just expect another email from me because you've gotten 50 or 60 this week, but we're doing an info session about the Archer program. And so it is like you would apply for it now. This is right now predominantly for graduate students. And so you would go to DC next summer and you're placed in an internship and you learn all sorts of things about policy. And then you would specialize in your area or your field of study. So for us, it might be healthcare, somebody else that might be, economics or these other areas that they work on. But anyway, attend that too.
And if you guys can get into that and can afford the time and attention to it and you're interested in that field, that is excellent experience. Yeah.
Well, any last minute questions from students or anybody on the call?
We love you. Thanks for caring about what we do for a living. Thank you.
Everyone ready to become a JD in healthcare? I'm inspired.
Yeah, be careful what you wish for, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
All these wrinkles are from compliance problems, aren't they?
Well, thank you all so much, Professor Tesmer, Professor Drummond. We just appreciate your time. Students on the call, thank you for taking out some time today to attend. And we look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you so